In this video, I am going to talk about probably the second biggest problem you're going to have if you put a granny flat in your backyard. And of course, the first biggest problem will probably be building permits, building planning department, and getting the project through their list of mind-numbing obstacles. And I'm not even going to go into the amount of money that you're going to have to spend for something like this. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to our problem, and that is going to be plumbing, underground plumbing, the waste pipe plumbing system. And that will be the fact that the end of the waste line is usually going to be at the minimum height it could possibly be buried in the ground at the back of the house. However, if it's running from the front of the house to the back of the house, you can stop watching this video right now because you're going to be able to tie into it quite easily. But that isn't going to be the standard. Most of the time it's running from the back of the house to the street or towards the front of the house. And if you need to extend the plumbing drain line and you have a situation like this, then you could run out of room. You could actually create a problem to where the pipe would be either too close to the top of the soil to be approved by your local building department, or you could actually have it to where it would be sticking out of the soil and it definitely wouldn't be approved by your local building department. Now, there is one more thing I'd like to point out when looking at this picture, and that would be the fact that your property might be sloping from the back to the front, and this usually allows the water to drain to the street and then down the street to the storm drain system. And if this is the case, then your pipe might be sloping the same distance as the top of the soil and you wouldn't have a problem. So again, another thing that you would need to consider. And of course, if you cannot connect to the back of the house, you are going to need to install a new plumbing waste line. And that line is going to need to connect into the existing sewer somewhere. And this is where it could really start to become expensive, especially if the connection you need is somehow underneath the street. But hopefully you won't have to go that far and you will be able to connect it somewhere on the property. And of course, the next problem will be all the obstacles that you could run into. For example, you will be digging a trench around your property because it's not going to make a lot of sense for you to go underneath the house with your plumbing, tear up your building foundation. It's going to make a little more sense to go around the house. And of course, this could be either side of the house also. A view of it from the bottom there, just trying to give you an idea of how the pipe is sloping in hopes of explaining something that makes sense. And of course, I have this drawn in here. Your pipes could be completely different. You could be coming off of here at a 45-degree angle, or this could be a little closer or a little further away. Just trying to give you an idea. You're not going to be able to look at this and say, hey, I'm going to be able to do this exact same thing. And for those of you who don't really understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a trench, this trench could start at 2 feet here, and then that could be the highest spot. Everything there would be sloping 1/4 of an inch per foot or 1/8 of an inch per foot, depending upon what size pipe you're going to be using, until you eventually get to the spot where you're going to have to dig a giant hole if you can't find that plumbing pipe, and I've had to do that before. Now, enough of the bad news. What would the trench look like if you could connect to the back of the house? It would look something like this. You would just simply dig a trench down to where your plumbing pipe was, and maybe an existing cleanout would give you a clue, or you might have a bathroom in the back of the house. And of course, that would be a good place to start. And then you would just simply dig a trench to the granny flat or tiny home, whatever you're building back there. And something else that could save you a lot of money would be that you could simply raise the height of the building and then bring some more soil into the back of the property if the pipe wasn't deep enough in the soil, or if you simply needed a few more inches, or in some cases even a foot. You could simply raise the house and then put a couple of steps or a small stairway that would be going up to the front door. And again, I'm just throwing out a couple of options here. Because if I had the choice, I would definitely raise the house instead of digging that big trench and trying to find the main sewer pipe going around all of the other obstacles that would be required, like sidewalks, driveways, and of course big trees to get a new plumbing pipe in. Another idea, and this might not be feasible, would be to move the building a little closer to the house. maybe everything would work out a little better, but of course you would have to make sure that your planning department would approve something like that. And even though something like this might not be feasible, you could always put it in the front of your house. But again, this is something that would need to be approved by your local planning department, because most of the time we have easements that require a minimum distance to the front of a building, the front of your home, and possibly the center of the street. And of course, that would be something your local planning department could help you figure out. And the last couple of items I want to mention in the video would be to make sure that you are on a sewer drainage system and not a septic tank. If you have a septic tank and a leach field, then there's a good chance you're not going to be able to build your tiny home or granny flat over the leach field. So keep that in mind also. And the last thing I want to point out, even though I already pointed this out in the video already, would be if the sewer pipe was located in the back of the house, maybe you have a back easement and maybe even an alley, something like that. If that's the case, then as I mentioned earlier, then you would be able to tie into this a little easier. If, of course, the building was going to be located in the back and not the front. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you liked it, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button and feel free to leave any comments or questions in the video comment area or email them to me and I will answer them as soon as possible.